The evidence in this case has spoken loud and clear that he is Laken Riley's killer and that he killed her because she would not let him rape her.
This monster took away our chances to see Laken graduate from nursing school, and he took my best friend.
The murder of Laken Riley leaving some hard lessons. Her family overcome by emotion in court. This morning, we are focusing on what's next and what's being done to prevent future tragedies like this. And Susan Smith yesterday turned on the tears, but is remaining locked up for now. The judge who presided over the Casey Anthony trial is joining us to talk about when, if ever, Smith gets parole. Also this hour, accused murderer Brad Simpson is now petitioning for release as his wife Suzanne remains missing. Plus, a man is facing prison time after shooting a home invader. The timing of the second shot and the state where it took place could be tipping the scales at trial. It's all next right here on Opening Statements. Good morning and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julia Janae, filling in for Julie Grant. Thanks so much for being with us this morning as we kick off the day of trial coverage. And just like an actual trial, Opening Statements get you ready, give you a roadmap for what's ahead in court. So let's first take a look at what's on our daily docket.
As to the verdict, it reads as follows. We, the jury, find as follows: malice murder. We find the defendant guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We find the defendant guilty. And count 19, making a false statement. We find the defendant guilty.
Convicted toddler killer Leilani Simon's sentencing is scheduled in Georgia at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And also in Georgia, Colin Gray's arraignment happens today at 9 a.m. He's the father of accused Appalachia High School shooter Colt Gray. And also our newest trial, we're looking at the Jealous Ex Shot Dead trial for Brian Camp. It resumes at 9 a.m. Eastern. Now, Camp is charged with manslaughter for the shooting death of his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. And we will have the latest from that trial very shortly. But now we're going to get to our top story this morning. It's a heartbreaking one. There were emotional moments yesterday from Laken Riley's family as Jose Ibarra was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the death of this 22-year-old nursing student.
Laken's life was not the only life taken on that day that Jose Ibarra attacked her. The life of her family and friends was taken too. None of us will ever be the same. This monster took away our chances to see Laken graduate from nursing school. He took away our ability to meet our future son-in-law. He destroyed our chances of meeting our grandchildren. And he took my best friend.
That was Laken's mom pleading to the judge as she read her victim impact statement. Laken's stepfather, John Phillips, shared the last journal entry of the 22-year-old titled, "To My Future Husband."
To my future husband, I want you to know that I'm thinking about you and can't wait to love you in the best way I know how for the rest of our lives. I pray you know and feel the importance of my love and hopes for our relationship. No matter what challenges we face, I pray that our trust in God and love for one another overrules the obstacle. May our relationship last forever. Your future wife, Laken.
And to drive things home for the judge, the prosecution played video of these moments, the moments that police officers told Laken's family about the murder and who the victim was. And after it was all said and done yesterday, the judge found Jose Ibarra guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. One of the more powerful videos from the bench during this trial was Laken Riley jogging one of her final moments alive. And we're talking about what we can learn from this tragic case. How can it prevent future victims? That's what we heard over and over through those victim impact statements yesterday. So we're bringing in to discuss a panel of guests. We have criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Matthew Timpanic, private investigator and retired Army counterintelligence officer Manuel Gomez, and criminal defense attorney and civil rights attorney John Phillips is with us. Thank you all for being on as we break down this heartbreaking case, but wondering where do we go from here. I want to start with you, Attorney Timpanic. Your thoughts on the judge's decision yesterday and what may happen next in a case like this?
So, based on the facts and evidence, the evidence of guilt was overwhelming in this case. The prosecution's case left no doubt that anybody but the defendant committed these heinous acts. And based on it, he sentenced the defendant to the statutory maximum what he could give. However, I don't know if the case ends here, because remember, the federal government also has concurrent jurisdiction over this case. There's no double jeopardy. So in the new administration takes over in January, the new GOJ could look into this case and file federal murder charges with the intent to seek the death penalty. Will they do that? I don't know. But it's a serious possibility given the extreme heinous nature of the crimes and unforgivable acts that took the life of Laken Riley.
Matthew, I think that answers a lot of questions that people have about the death penalty, why it was not sought at all by prosecutors in this case. So that life in prison without parole was the max that this judge could give Jose Ibarra in Georgia. Manuel, what can you tell us about your research into perhaps the background of Jose Ibarra, his brother, Diego Ibarra, and their ties back to their home country of Venezuela?
What I found when I started researching on Jose Ibarra, that he belongs to the Tren de Agua gang. Now, this is a very lethal gang. It's actually the governor of Texas has just recently, on September 23rd, put a $5,000 bounty on all members of the Tren de Agua gang, which Jose Ibarra belongs to. Okay, for any information leading to their arrest. So that, you know, Texas is taking a proactive approach on hunting down this type of gang member. Jose Ibarra showed indicatively his characteristics of a gang member and a serial killer. It was clear to me that if you see his face in the court, he does not show emotion. When he was told he was given life without parole, he stood there emotionless. Any other normal person would have been, eyes would have blinked, maybe even cried, something. Nothing from this guy, because he's done it before. This is a deadly gang, and he is the perfect example. And I hope the Laken Riley trial makes America realize we need a national database to track these gangs. We are currently being besieged by these social terrorist gangs from other countries, and we need to track them. All law enforcement states need to be able to get together, the 50 states, and show the information so that we can stop the infiltration of these gangs. Currently, they've been growing under our backyards without us realizing it. And we're not telling the other state what the other state is doing. So the only really proactive state right now taking action to stop this gang and stop guys like Jose Ibarra is Texas. And they've infiltrated New York, Colorado. And I just want to end it with this. This is the same gang that attacked the Aurora, Colorado housing complex. This is the Tren de Agua that Jose Ibarra belongs to. He is a killer, and he's just one among us.
And to your point, Manuel, the Georgia Governor, Brian Kemp, he put out a statement after this decision by the judge, sharing his condolences with the family, but also talking about border control and the need for it in light of a case like this. But John Phillips, I want to talk about this family. You've represented families who have been the family members of victims in civil rights cases and civil cases. But can we talk about where the family goes from here? This was such a heartbreaking day yesterday, but talk about where they are in this and what they are likely going to be faced with going forward, knowing that if this isn't a death penalty case, they won't be dragged into court as often again in the future with appeals as they would have if the death penalty had been sought. But there may be other situations that they have to deal with going forward.
Right. Julia,
when you were a beat reporter here in Jacksonville, you and I have sat on the couches of some of my clients and had their stories told, and they're awful. And the most important thing that they say is they don't want their loved one to die in vain. And I imagine Laken Riley's family is going to do everything they can to go after these gangs, to go after every measure of justice, not just civil, not just criminal, not just court of public opinion, but changing laws, changing policies to be able to make a difference for their daughter and other people's daughters.
Absolutely. I do want to play a moment from yesterday, really something that hurt the hearts of people inside of that courtroom and those of us watching, but it was shown for the purpose of making sure this judge understood what this was like for the family. This is Laken Riley's mother on body camera footage when she is being told about what happened to her daughter.
It's not good. I don't want to tell you yes or no because I don't have names. I don't know who anybody is.
This is so hard to watch, Matthew. It's devastating to think of what this family has gone through. But tell me if you think preventative measures can happen after a case like this, especially because it involves a college campus.
I think there is. Unfortunately, here's the reality. Our society is reactionary. We're not proactive, if it were. This case is so egregious, so heinous, and it involves somebody who had their entire life ahead of them, that it actually demands people to pay attention and to provide action. I think something like this will eventually lead to, I think, more at a federal level, kind of a unified border security, and definitely involved with gangs. Because like this individual was part of a deadly gang. And like he was saying earlier, it's like he was emotionless when the verdict was read. Life in prison, you don't even blink. That tells me that he always knew his life was going to end up with him ending up in prison. And unfortunately, he was in a position to take Laken Riley's life when he shouldn't have.
I want to ask you as our final point, Manuel, before we have to say goodbye to you. When I'm watching that video of Laken Riley running, there are people there. She's not alone on this trail. I can see how that would give you a sense, a false sense perhaps, of security, where you're on this trail. It's well lit in terms of daylight, but yet this happens. From your perspective, being a private investigator, but also retired Army intelligence officer, what are you seeing that could possibly have been done to prevent something horrible like this?
Well, I mean, even though there were some people on the trail, she was, if you look at she running further down, she's running in isolated areas. You have to avoid being by yourself. Please, if you're going to run in a track, run where there's large amounts of people, run in a gym. The safety in the street is not there, okay? These guys are apex predators. As you saw in the video, him prowling around with his hoodie, looking for her. These guys look for that opportune moment. And as you see in the video now, you see her run off and she cuts off into the woods. At that moment, when you see her disappear right then and there, she's vulnerable. She can be taken at any time. People, please, run in an open area where there's at least more than 10 to 20 people. If you can, run in the safety of a gym. Do not put yourself in this situation, especially women, because that's what they target. These people target women like Laken, and this is just one case that was given national attention, but Laken is just one of hundreds, except she got the attention. Again, I hope this causes the government to make this national database so we can bring justice to all these families.
It's unfair that even has to be the thought process of someone who just wants to run, just getting that exercise, but it's a reality, Manuel. Thank you for that analysis. For everyone on the panel, Matthew and John are sticking around with us, but we have more ahead on opening statements. Take a listen.
She was a great mother up until the moment she killed him.
What a historic day yesterday. Convicted child killer Suzanne Smith, we learned, will remain behind bars after her parole, marking 30 years, was denied. We're breaking down her emotional plea to the judge. Plus, Suzanne Simpson's still missing more than a month after she disappeared. This as her husband, Brad Simpson, who was charged with her murder, is now asking to get out of jail early. More next.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it. And I love Michael and Alice with all my heart.
That was yesterday. A mother who has been convicted of killing her 2 sons had a tearful plea for leniency. It was just one of the many moments from Suzanne Smith's parole hearing yesterday. But the board's final decision is what's trending in true crime this morning. Take a look.
As a reminder, Mrs. Mary did recuse herself. Ms. Susan Smith is denied parole. The vote is unanimous. Numbers 1 and 6. Thank you.
Unanimous decision by this parole board. 53-year-old Suzanne Smith denied a conditional release from prison in her first parole hearing after 30 years. Now, she remains eligible for parole every 2 years from this point forward. So this morning, we're asking, with a focus on Wednesday, what did her words there in front of the board reveal to you? Here to discuss, we have a very special guest, the judge that presided over the Casey Anthony trial years ago. Retired Chief Judge Belvin Perry is with us. Wonderful to have you on this morning, Judge Perry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
I have to first ask you just your thoughts on Suzanne Smith and her case in general, because when you think about infamous trials where a mother is accused of killing her own child, Suzanne Smith's name is, of course, up there from the 90s, but also the trial that you presided over, Casey Anthony, who was acquitted of those charges. But what do you remember about the Suzanne Smith trial and the time period that it took?
I remember when you first heard about it, she blamed some, quote, carjackers, kidnappers who kidnapped her 2 children. But at the same time, law enforcement, based upon what she had told them, did this gigantic search using enormous resources to later learn that the motivation for this crime was not because of the love of her children. It was for the love of a man who did not want children. So she sacrificed 2 children, her own flesh and blood, to be with someone else. And to me, the motivation for that crime was unspeakable.
That motive was one that just was so difficult for people to hear. We heard that from the former prosecutors who spoke up during that parole hearing, saying that she just wanted her old life to go away. She pushed her boys into the lake in that car, along with her wedding album and her wedding dress, and that she probably would have put her current husband, her husband at the time, in that same car if she could have. I do want to look back, Judge Perry, at the comments we heard from Suzanne Smith, where she was asked about some issues that she's had behind bars. Take a listen.
I've never been in trouble before, and the things that I have been found guilty of in here have been just stupidity. I know I made a lot of mistakes in here, and I have learned from them. And before this last infraction had been 10 years. Because I grew up and I knew that I needed to stop making dumb decisions.
Judge Perry, do you think, or were you surprised at all by this parole board denying her the opportunity to be released after 30 years behind bars?
No, I was not surprised. When you look at the criteria that parole boards would use. They would look at signs of remorse. It is quite evident to a lot of people, particularly to me, that a lot of that emotions that she displayed was contrived. They look at the motivation of the crime. You can never forget what was the motivation for the crime. They looked at her institutional behavior. Yes, her attorney talked about mental illness, but where were the expert witnesses to back up that she may have suffered from some type of mental illness in the past, and whether or not she's still suffering from that? So it was no surprise to me when you look at her prison record and what happened while she was there, drug possession, that they denied the parole. Those kids will never be paroled. They will never be brought back to life. And the pain that the father of those two kids continue to suffer day in and day out will never go away. So it didn't surprise me that they denied her parole.
You're mentioning David Smith, the father of Alex and Michael. Gosh, when he spoke yesterday so poignantly about his two little boys and how he wanted to end his own life because of the grief that she caused. I mean, it just was a moment there inside of that parole board hearing. Let's take a listen back to him saying something that even surprised me about what he has never received from Susan Smith.
You know, God gives us free choice. And she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. Wasn't something that she didn't mean to do. She purposely meant to end her life.
He also said, Judge Perry, that he never got a letter, a call, or any kind of remorse from Susan Smith. That seemed to surprise some people, that in advance of a parole board hearing, she would not be reaching out to the one person that she caused the most pain.
Well, she should have reached out to him many years ago. It's been 30 years since the commission of this crime. It goes to the issue, all of this is self-serving to benefit her and to her alone. She didn't care about her former husband. She didn't even care about her two kids. You look at this, what type of individual puts two kids in a car, purposely drives somewhere with the intent of killing those two kids, kids who loved her and adored her, and then watch those kids in a car that goes into a lake knowing that they're gonna suffer while they're dying. That's unspeakable behavior. And as some folks would say, the tears that she shed was crocodile tears, that she only was concerned about herself then, and she's only concerned about herself now.
Judge Perry, I'm so glad that we're getting your analysis on this. So it makes me wonder, though, the way that you're speaking about it, every 2 years she's going to be in front of this parole board. Do you think the next time is going to be any different? Is there anything she can do in the span of 2 years that may change their minds next time?
It's difficult to say. I mean, life should mean life. And there's some crimes which are so unspeakable. What you're basically saying, if they grant her parole in 2 years, that the two lives that she took more than 30 years ago basically have no meaning. She is lucky to be alive. In most parts of the country, that type of behavior and actions on her part would have led to a death sentence.
And that's what the prosecution was trying to get in this case, but that jury, as you mentioned, they spared her life in this case. I do want to get your opinion on another trending news story that we're following. We've got a convicted killer mom who is set to learn her sentence later today. That's Leilani Simon in Savannah, Georgia. The judge delivered a verdict in this case almost 1 month ago. Let's go back to that moment.
As to the verdict, it reads as follows. We, the jury, find as follows: malice murder. We find the defendant guilty. Count 2, felony murder, we find the defendant guilty. In count 19, making a false statement, we find the defendant guilty.
Leilani Simon there. She faces life in prison after a jury convicted her on 19 charges, including a top count of murder, all in connection to the death of her toddler son, 20-month-old Quentin. This was back in 2022. So, Judge Perry, we just want to ask, what do you think is going to happen with this judge's sentencing? How are baby killers, that's really what she is, how are baby killers handled inside of the court system?
The long and short of it, most of them will receive a sentence of life imprisonment. Basically, end of story. Very few will get the death penalty.
Yeah, no death penalty in this one. And the question may be if she gets parole at all. Do you see a situation where this judge may say that she should be granted some kind of parole, perhaps given her young age and her dependency at the time on illicit drugs?
I doubt very seriously the judge is going to get involved and mention anything about parole. That's left up to the Department of Corrections and the parole system.
Judge Perry, thank you so much for weighing in on these cases. We certainly appreciate your time this morning. And we have a lot more. We have to get to a break, but here's what's next on Opening Statements.
It's always important to do what is right, especially when it is most difficult. This situation is heartbreaking for us, but it brings some peace to our family, knowing that the authorities have gathered enough evidence to move forward with charges.
We are spotlighting the search for Suzanne Simpson as her husband, an accused murderer, Brad Simpson, he says there's not enough evidence to keep him locked up. We'll break it all down. Plus, we're going to cover this new trial on Court TV. It's a man who's charged with manslaughter for the shooting death of his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend who broke into their home while they slept. Was this self-defense? This morning, we are turning the spotlight on the disappearance of Suzanne Simpson and murder suspect Brad Simpson, her husband. The continuing search for his wife is happening there in Texas. And news that Brad's attorney is fighting for him to be released from jail is new this morning. The mother of two has been missing now for more than a month after she was seen fighting with her husband at the house that they shared in the San Antonio area. Now, Simpson's attorney reportedly believes there's not enough evidence to keep his client behind bars. But the arrest affidavit in this case says that Simpson was seen purchasing cement, a construction bucket, heavy-duty trash bags, Clorox, and insect repellent. This was the day after his wife disappeared. Suzanne Simpson's sister told News Nation when they heard Suzanne was missing, they knew that she was gone.
From my understanding, they had this fight at the Argyle Club. They came home, the neighbors witnessed it, and I just assumed that, they had figured the whole thing out that night, and so I didn't fully understand the severity of the situation, but once I understood that, the children hadn't spoken to her in 16 hours, that's when I just knew, okay, she's already in heaven. That's just all there is to it.
Suzanne Simpson Brad Simpson remains behind bars. Suzanne Simpson remains missing. He's there on a $3 million bond, so we're wondering what could be the chances that he gets released pending his trial. Let's talk about it with criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Matthew Tempanik back with us, and now joining us, domestic violence expert and former law enforcement officer Claudia King. Great to have you both talking about this case that we continue to cover. Claudia, when we hear the sister saying that we knew that she was gone, and the mother we've heard of this victim saying that we were working on a plan to figure out what to do once she left him. She was trying to leave. As a domestic violence expert, can you talk about that statistic of how at risk women, partners, it could be men as well, how at risk they become when they try to leave?
Absolutely. So we do know that when they try to leave, that is the most dangerous time. And that is the time that we can expect to see a higher level of violence, because that's when the abuser is ultimately losing all the control and they can't handle that. Another statistic that we know is it generally on average takes a victim 7 times to leave an abusive situation. So we don't know where Suzanne was at in that process. Was this her first time? Was she really done? You know, we don't know. But again, we do know that if she was trying to leave, which it does seem that that was the plan, that that would be the most dangerous time and the time that Brad would be most likely to commit an extremely violent act against her.
Matthew, we don't have a body in this case. That hasn't stopped prosecutors from filing murder charges for Brad Simpson. What are the chances you think that a judge will agree to let him out on bond, especially considering that we've got this multi-million-dollar bond that's in place already?
I definitely think that without the body, it's always going to be a circumstantial case. But my understanding, it's a relatively strong circumstantial case. So what you need to understand is when you prosecute a case, you either have a direct evidence case or you have a circumstantial case. When you have a circumstantial case, you have to eliminate everyone who could have done this. Everybody, every family member, every friend knows Brad Simpson is the one who likely committed this crime. So when you think about what are the chances he gets out, I think as if we're talking 6 months, a year down the road, a judge is not going to have to be able to keep that bond in place to keep him in custody. He's going to have to lower it because it's, all right, you can't just essentially use our system to hold someone when you know you don't have enough evidence. You need to actually convene a grand jury, present the evidence, and go forward. Or you need to wait until you get some.
And Claudia King, let's talk about the fact that we don't have a body. Suzanne Simpson has not been found, but there have been these searches. We know there was a search of a landfill, but the new information we learned from the arrest affidavit that was unsealed last week is that he was asking people, where's the nearest dump? So there's something to that landfill. How difficult is it? You know, we hear the stories of people and remains being found in landfills, but truly, how difficult is it to actually find something there?
It's incredibly difficult. I mean, you think about a place that is potentially acres and acres large. There's debris being dumped on a daily basis over and over again. It seems like there might be cement involved. So if she is encased in cement, that's going to make it even more difficult to find. So, you know, they're up against a really tough task unless Brad decides to state where he put her or just some type of evidence comes up randomly that they're able to locate her. I'm just afraid that that might not happen anytime soon.
Yeah, the family certainly asking him to relieve their pain by sharing where she is, but again, it is going to be difficult to see if that happens. Claudia and Matthew, thank you so much for your analysis. That's all the time we have for, but we'll continue to follow this story. Well, enjoy the rest of your morning. Coming up, we're going to turn our attention to Massachusetts. We've got a new trial here on Court TV, the Jealous Ex Shot Dead trial, where the defendant says he shot his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend out of self-defense. And the prosecution agrees, but only in part. The defense argues that he used necessary force in this case. When we come back.
Tonight on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. We have a big hour ahead here.
Your deplorable actions are unforgivable.
The community still doesn't know how this Boston police officer died.
He can't prove one element of his case. It was a dramatic day, a dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Now, for what's tipping the scales in the newest trial we are tracking here at Court TV, the Jealous Ex Shot Dead trial is underway in Massachusetts. Defendant Brian Camp is charged with manslaughter for the death of Jonathan Latender. This was his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, and prosecutors say Latender broke into that home that Camp shared with his girlfriend and their 2 kids and began attacking Camp in his sleep. Camp claims that he shot in self-defense. The first shot, the state agrees with him, says he was a victim and he was lawful in that shot. But it's the second shot to Latender's head approximately 8.5 minutes after the first shot that shows Camp, according to the state, used excessive and unnecessary force. Here's more on the story from Court TV's crime and justice correspondent, Matt Johnson.
24-year-old Brian Camp is charged with manslaughter in the death of Jonathan Latender.
He was 27 years old. He was the general manager for Dunkin' Donuts. And it was through his work at Dunkin' Donuts that he met a young woman named Brooke Janik. During a break in Brooke's relationship with Mr. Camp in early 2022, when they had split up, Mr. Latender and Ms. Janik struck up a relationship.
Their relationship was brief. When she went back to Camp, Latender did not take it well. And on December 27, 2022, Camp, Brooke, and their 2 children were sleeping at a home when Latender broke in shortly after midnight. Brooke heard someone coming up the stairs and screamed.
And then before I even could see, because I just woke up, before I could even see, there was some guy standing in the doorway. Before you know it, the kid's like on top of me. Mind you, I had no clothes on. I'm trying to wrestle this kid. I don't know, he was like trying to dig my eyes out, telling me he was going to kill me.
Investigators say that there was a brutal fight. Brooke called 911, and on the audio of that call, a gunshot is heard. Then about 8.5 minutes later, she reacts to a second gunshot.
Okay, you just heard another gunshot?
Latender was shot in the torso and in the back of the head. Prosecutors say the first shot to the torso was lawful and in self-defense. They claim the second shot was not, but the defense alleges Latender was still able to move and still a threat.
Mr. Latender was able to move, was moving, and that Mr. Camp, after all of this, believed that he needed to shoot again because he needed to stop this thing because it clearly was not stopping.
Camp pleaded not guilty.
Yeah, and I shot him because the entire time he'd been telling me he's going to kill me.
This is a unique trial, a unique case. Some are saying it shouldn't even be going to trial in the way that this incident went down. We're asking, do the state laws there in Massachusetts having to do with stand your ground, self-defense, the Castle Doctrine, do they tip the scales of justice? And we have a great panel to discuss this from 2 states that sometimes are on opposite ends of the spectrum. We have in Massachusetts, attorney and former homicide prosecutor Richard Grundy, and in Florida, we have civil rights attorney John Phillips with us. Richard, let me get your take on all things Massachusetts there and what you think about this case where the prosecution says, yes, self-defense for the first shot, but the second shot, manslaughter.
So that does, from what I've heard and listening to the open statement, lines up with the current law in Massachusetts, which does recognize the Castle Doctrine, that being Massachusetts has a duty to retreat, but that duty to retreat is negated if you are lawfully within your abode, apartment, house, whatever, protecting yourself or the others. So that aspect of it fits in with this prosecution only because the duty is that you're excused to use in these circumstances is only so much as to negate, quell the threat that is against you. And as we heard in the opening statements, this case is really about those 8 minutes after the first shot and prior to that second one, which, you know, has been put forth by the prosecution as basically a kill shot of a person who was potentially mortally injured at that point in time. I was interested in listening to the openings that we didn't hear any discussion with respect to medical testimony as to exactly what life may or was not in the victim at the time the second shot was issued to his head. But it is there. I think it would be a difficult case in light of those 8 minutes and a shot to the head for the prosecution not to prosecute. They went with manslaughter, which is really a negligence standard, which is somewhat of an odd fit. But I think that what's notable is it takes it out of any kind of minimum mandatory sentencing. He is actually trying this to a jury and to a judge if he's found guilty, who will do that sentencing and could put him on probation.
You're raising a great point, Richard, about the deadliness of the second shot versus the first. We're going to talk about that more in a minute, and we are going to be seeing those opening statements in our next hour. But first, I want to get Attorney John Phillips's legal analysis of this case. And John, you know, because I was a reporter in the area where you are, I know many of your cases personally, having covered them, and you represented the victim's family of a case where the defendant claimed stand your ground, which in Florida always gets headlines. Talk about your take on this particular case where this was an ex who broke into their home while they were sleeping.
And you're right. And in that case, it took 2 trials to fully convict Michael Dunn of the murder of Jordan Davis. The first case was about an attempted murder. And what you're going to hear here throughout the defense case is need versus want. He needed to shoot him the first time, but he wanted to shoot him the second time, right? And that's where the medical testimony is really key to see how much damage the first shot did. But let's boil back to old common law England that we brought with us with the castle doctrine and self-defense. And a man or woman is at home in their castle and safe. There's no duty to retreat. You don't need to have someone flip from being an aggressor to a non-aggressor. I do think that's why they charge the lower level, but I think this is a state's case.
And Richard, I do think that from the openings we did learn that the prosecution says he was incapacitated with that first shot, that he was in the kitchen, and you have a defendant who took a phone call from his boss during that 8-minute period between the 2 shots, that he took a picture of the shooting victim in his home. I don't know how that will sit with a jury, perhaps just to show this happened, but they're going to say that he wasn't moving. Is it a problem, and perhaps it's a societal issue that the prosecution wants to make sure we don't condone, that you can't treat him like an animal, that if he's in pain, if he is not moving, or he's seemingly had a really terrible situation from the first shot, that we don't just put you down, which the prosecution says they heard the defendant say that. The officers are going to say they heard him say, if it were me, I would want someone to put me down.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Julia, and I think that's why I said I think that it's a tough case for the prosecution not to address, and they've left the door open for someone other than themselves to decide ultimately how it's addressed upon a conviction, that being the judge, and that being the judge having a range of from probation to 20 years incarcerated. I will say that I know Steve Gagne. I've worked a little with him over the years. I thought he did a very good job in the opening and really bifurcated these issues between the initial clearly self-defense of an individual being attacked and that second shot. I found it interesting that neither party got into this telephone call with the boss and any further with respect to the picture, because between what the medical examiner will say about the first shot and what that boss discussed with this individual, I think that will give us be a good barometer as to where on this. And I'm just kind of surprised we didn't hear more of in the openings.
Right, we should hear more soon. Real quick before we have to go to break, John Phillips, how do you think a jury is going to react to Jeremy Camp?
Oh, it's going to be a tough case. I'd rather have the civil case, I'll say that. But you know, I think the jury will convict.
And Brian Camp, I meant to say Brian Camp. John Phillips and Richard Grundy, thank you so much for being with us this hour, sharing your expertise. That wraps up our show, Opening Statements, but you can watch or share this episode. Just go to CourtTV.com, click on the Shows tab. But up next, Court TV Live begins. We're going to get you caught up on that case. We're just talking about the trial of Brian Camp. Opening Statements are next.